I have not posted in over a month. I just simply haven't been reading too much, so I thought let's just do a recap of everything that I read in April and so far in May. May's not done yet, but I don't think I'm gonna finish any more books this month, so just figure let's get this video out the way. Let's try to start posting again. I was doing really well when I first started this channel and then went through a little bit of a personal crisis, and since then it's been like such a struggle to get back into filming for this channel because I do have another channel. Nobody cares. All right, so April started off actually pretty good. I read some books. I did read Mile High. This is Liz Tomford. This is the first book in, I think, the trilogy, or maybe there's 4 books at this point. This is an ice hockey romance. It's my first ever ice hockey romance. I don't know if it'll be my last, but it's the only one I think I currently have in my shelves. I don't think I have any more to read. First time reading from this author as well. I went into this book not really expecting too much. I was really like getting burned from reading a lot of trashy romance novels that are popular on TikTok but don't do very well. I thought this one was a little bit better than the previous ones that I've been reading. I think the biggest issue with this book is it is just too long. For the most of the book, they're in a relationship or like a situationship, and it just doesn't really like go anywhere. It's kind of the same thing over and over again. It's a lot of insta love, and I don't know, it wasn't interesting enough for me to give it more than a 3 star. So I ended up giving it 3 stars. I thought it was fine. I thought the male character wasn't too bad. I do feel like he bordered on sort of a little bit of sexual harassment because she's basically a flight attendant and he is an ice hockey player, and she's working and he is basically trying to seduce her for a lot of the time or whatever. I mean, I just thought it was a little bit too much, but it kind of worked, so I just ended up ignoring all of that. And yeah, I gave it a 3 star. I thought it was fine. Okay, next up, I finished The Prophet and the Idiot by Jonas Jonasson. I did start this, I think I started this in March and I finished it in April. It just feels like so long ago that I read this book. I feel like the first half of the book was really good and then the second half really let it down. It got a little political. There were mentions of Trump and Obama, and it's based in like 2011, I think. So yeah, 2011. And I just did not find myself to be very interested in. Also, it's about basically the apocalypse. If you kind of like read the synopsis about the end of the world, and this prophet, you know, she is a astrophysicist. She predicts that the world's going to end in just like 10 days time or whatever. But you get to like the middle of the book and the 10 days are up. And then so the rest of the story is like, you know, it's quirky, it's satirical. It's there's parts of it that are silly and fun, but I think maybe some of it got lost in translation because it is a translated work, because obviously the author is Swedish, so the original writing is in Swedish. Maybe some of that humor was just not translated properly, but I think overall the story just kind of let it down. I don't think the second half was very good, and again I felt like it was a little too long. I think it could have been just a cute little novella and that would have been fun. But yeah, I ended up giving this like a 2 or 2.5. I really bumped it down because it just let me down and it was just so boring at the end. Okay, then I read one of my anticipated books, The Tempest and the Tea, or The Tempest of Tea by Hafsa Faisal. This I got in a fairy loot. I think this was the April fairy loot, so I decided to read it straight away. And you know what? This has got vampires, it's, you know, tea rooms. I thought it would be a cozy little fantasy, and it just let me down. It is YA, but it just seemed to be very rushed. And I'm not saying that I wish the book was longer, because I feel like the length is fine. It's like 350 or so, yeah, 330 or so pages. That is a good length book if you want to do a cozy fantasy. This just wasn't cozy enough. There wasn't enough of the tea room. There's like a little bit of a heist. And then, you know, I feel like there was a lot of forced romances that didn't need to be in the book. At least maybe not this book, maybe later on in other books if they are going to do more books in this series, which I think they might do. I just think a lot of stuff was crammed into this little book that didn't need to happen. They should have just focused on maybe 1 or 2 characters, obviously have the side characters, but I think the problem for me is you jump from a lot of different perspectives and it just didn't work. it didn't work for me. I don't know. Oh, and also there was a lot of info dumping. Like I think the first 80 pages or so of this book, you're just thrown a lot of information, not really much happens in the story. So it's just more like, here's this, here's this, here's this. And I didn't care for that. And then also towards the end of the book, you like find out more stuff and it's more info dumping. And I'm just like, I don't care at this point. So it just wasn't interesting enough. And also didn't really care for the romance side of it too. There was a couple of romance plots that were lingering and happening that I didn't really care because I didn't really care about the characters yet. I think that's the issue. So I thought this was a flop. I think I gave it a 2-star. So yeah. Okay, next I read Down the Drain by Julia Fox. So I have seen so many people give this 4 or 5 stars. So I thought, okay, fine. I do like my memoirs. I hadn't listened to one in a while, so this was I think the last one I listened to was the Paris Hilton one back in January. So, you know, I definitely wanted to listen to this and I was just in the mood. So I started listening to it while I was sitting outside and I think I finished it in like 3 or 4 days, something like that. Now listen, I actually really enjoyed the first maybe third of this book. I thought it was very similar to 13. She also even mentions 13, the movie, that her life was very similar to that, because she did have kind of a out of control adolescent sort of start to life, and she wasn't really monitored too well by her parents, I would say. At least that's how she portrays it. So she definitely got into a lot of trouble when she was younger and just was wild, right? And a lot of people were like that. But I think the problem is it carried forth into her 20s and also her 30s. And I lost interest, I think probably 2/3 of the way in. It was like the same story over again with drugs or sleeping with like the wrong guy and stuff. And there was no reflection of her life, reflection of her mistakes or some sort of conclusion to the book. And I know obviously she's still living. She's only 34 or 35. You know, it's a memoir, but she's still young. She has a lot of life left to live. And I felt like maybe the book was written a little too soon, or not much had happened to her for her to really warrant writing a book like that, because a lot of her stories were just similar. So you just ended up reading the same thing over and over again. And I also feel like the writing was a little drawn out. There was I mean, I listened to it, so I'm not sure really how it was on the page, but it felt like there was a lot of run-on sentences and just sort of, you know, like just thoughts, like a stream of consciousness, as it were, as opposed to properly put together in a cohesive way for somebody, a stranger, like we're all strangers to her, to actually listen and understand her story. But I think the part that there wasn't really a reflection side of what had happened or some sort of conclusion, or even just like, you know, this is what happened now, this is, you know, I don't know, I just felt like she hadn't changed as a person by the time that you get to the end of the book. So as much as I wanted to like this book because I'd seen so many people like it, and I do like memoirs, I ended up giving it a 3-star. It was just not on par with some of the other memoirs that I have listened to. Okay, next up, I think, yeah, this next one is the last book that I read in April, and it is Mr. Maybe by Jane Green. So this was a reread of mine. I read this years and years and years ago when I was a teenager. This is a really old book, and it was like released in like 1999 or something. For whatever reason, I ordered this and it was a used copy, and it's signed by the author. So I have like a signed copy of this book. I don't know why, because this is awful. I don't remember this being so bad. And it's kind of strange because obviously as a teenager, a young teenager, I will add, when I read this, which I shouldn't have been reading this kind of book, because it's just like one of these chick lit sort of like early 2000 books, and it's very dated, this book, but I think ultimately, you know, reading it as in the age that I am now, which is closer to the age of the actual people in the book, I was hoping to relate to it a little bit more, or understand, or I don't know, enjoy it again. And I didn't. I thought the female main character was just really obnoxious and very unlikable. She was very, very pompous and up herself and just stupid, but not in like a funny way. She just was not relatable in any way. And that's why I think it's very much dated, because she wanted a guy with a lot of money. He has to have a really good job. You know, he has to have a nice apartment. Very, very superficial, materialistic things. And I think in today's age, especially given the economy and stuff, I think people are not like that anymore, right? I'm sure there's a lot of women out there, or maybe men as well, who still feel that way, but I think it's a very dated way of trying to find a partner. And so it was very jarring reading that, because it's through the whole book. And I ended up giving this a 2-star. I thought it was horrendous. She ends up basically meeting this guy who is really sweet and lovely, and they're very compatible in a way, but he doesn't have a job. He's trying to be a writer. He's trying to get his book published, and she has a really good job. And, you know, she just can't get past that. And he also feels insecure about it too. But he's not a bum. Like, he's literally a soon-to-be author, hoping to be, because he's a writer, right? And that is just hard as it is. So anyway, and she ends up going out with this other guy and getting engaged to him, and he's just disgusting and obnoxious, but he's very, very rich, and it's just queasy reading it. It's like, because she's putting herself in situations where she's uncomfortable, but she's doing it because he's rich, and I didn't like any of that. So I don't know why I remember this book from my childhood and actually liking it. I just remember really liking the guy who was the poor one, but even like rereading it, I didn't think he was all that amazing. So I don't know. I gave that a 2-star. Just a bad reread on my part, which was unfortunate. Okay, and then I'd seen a lot of people give praise to The Will of the Many. This one is by James Islington. Now, I started listening to this on Audible. I don't have an actual physical copy, and I ended up DNFing it. I was really enjoying it at first, but I think it's probably a book that I would prefer to read physically as opposed to listen to. I also was a little bit put off by how young the male main character is. At the start of the book, I thought it was really good. Like the first I'm assuming it was the first chapter. I don't really know with Audible like where I am with the chapters, but you're kind of thrown into this somewhat of a jail, and the world, like the world system in this book is very interesting, and I have to admit I didn't quite follow and understand how people's wills are taken from them. That to me was a little bit confusing, and maybe it's just, again, I kind of need to read it and not listen to it and do other things at the same time. But you know, when you first like go into the book, I assume this guy, the male character, was maybe 22, 26, or, you know, in his 20s, not old, but just, you know, a little bit older. But then you find out he's only 19 years old, and I just kind of like want to read books where people are older, like they have more experience. I don't want to always read not so much of a coming of age story, but a adolescent going into adulthood. Like I want to read, do you understand what I mean? I don't know why this is a fantasy book, why we have to have somebody that is just 19 years old. Like, maybe it doesn't matter when you read the actual book, but that kind of threw me off. And then basically he gets adopted by this, I don't understand who this guy is, because I didn't understand the magic system in this world with the wills. So it was very confusing, and I kind of just gave up on it, and I DNF'd it. It might be one where I come back to it if I do end up buying the book, but I just don't think at this point I'm going to buy a copy unless I, you know, find it for like £1 or whatever. But I thought it was really interesting. It's just those couple of things kind of just made me just decide not to continue reading it, which is unfortunate. Okay, next up, this is in May now. We're in May, so this month that I've been reading these books. I finished The Woman Who Lied by Claire Douglas. I think I started this back in March, and then I finally finished it this month. This one I ended up giving a 2-star. What can I say about this book? It was, yeah, I was kind of hoping that it would be maybe more fantasy, not fantasy, but maybe have a little bit more of the supernatural elements to it, and not go down the way it did. I think The beginning of the book, I was intrigued because it's basically about a woman who, for the last 10 years, she's been writing crime novels, and she decides for her final book of the series, she wants to kill off her main character, and she hasn't published the book yet. And then there's like these coincidences that happen in her life that have happened in her books, her previous books. So I thought, okay, that's interesting. But then when you like get to actually who the person is, what the outcome is of the story, I feel like it doesn't connect properly, because there's a scene at the beginning about a bus and a potential bomb threat. Like, I don't see how that happened in one of her books. Is that just supposed to be an actual coincidence that happened? I just don't know. It doesn't make sense to me. And then I don't want to give away the story, so I can't really complain about the issues that I have with this book, but I have some issues. I have issues with this book, and also it's just boring. It was really boring. And then when you get to like the actual twist, I was like, really? What? Huh? Like, really? Okay, anyway, so I gave that a 2-star. Potentially, I could even give it a lower star. I think I'm being generous at a 2-star, but you know, I've had like back-to-back bad books. I think so far, from what I've told you, the best books have been Mile High. I gave that a 3-star. Down the Drain, I gave 3-star. Everything else has been duds. And that theme is going to follow us, because I read this one, The Key to Midnight by Dean Koontz. This, I was trying to film a vlog where I'm rereading past reads from my past, and that makes sense. This is the second one, and then I have a third book. But I read Mr. Maybe, and I wanted to read The Key to Midnight, which I did finish again this month. And this is another one where I read back when I was a teenager. I think my brother had the original book, and I just read it, and I remember enjoying it. I don't know why, I just remember enjoying it, but I didn't remember anything about the plot. So I bought it again. This is a different copy. The normal copy has white, but whatever. And I actually read the, what is it? I read the the afterword from Dean Koontz after I finished the story, and he said that he went in and rewrote this. So this isn't even the original version of the book that I once read, which I think is the white cover version. So this is a version of the book that was slightly edited and rewritten by him because he found issues within his original story when it was going to go be reprinted. Whether that has changed my mind about the story or not, I don't know, because I don't remember what the first version had compared to this version. So I don't know if he made it worse or if it was just a bad book in general and I just remember liking it, or my taste have just obviously changed and I've grown up. So I don't really know, though that was interesting. It's not like the original version that I read when I was younger. Having said that, I still think this is a terrible book, and I gave it 2 stars. It's not a terrible book. I think the problem with this one is it was very much insta love. There is a romance in this, but it's more like a crime novel. It's not like his horror novels at all. So I remember this being just a regular Dean Koontz horror novel, but it's not. It's when he wanted to try to do crime novels, and he actually wrote it under a different name. Like when it was first released, it was released under the name of Lee Nichols, and I guess he just went against this and just decided to go full horror after trying to write some crime novels, because I don't think he does a good job at it. So fair enough to him, but I don't know why I remember this book and remember liking it. So maybe this is not the Dean Koontz book that I remember liking. I just remember the name of this one. There's definitely a few that I've read, and I just don't remember. I don't remember which one was the one that I truly liked. But this is basically about brainwashing, and that's kind of all you need to know. Maybe it was Mr. Murder that I read. I don't really know. I know a lot of people speak about Velocity. It could have been Velocity that I remember reading, and maybe it wasn't this one that I liked. It wasn't the Odd Thomas series. I didn't read any of those. And yeah, I don't know. I probably have to go and start reading all of his books to figure out which is the one that I liked. But I did like a couple, but to be honest with you, this round, going back to rereading books that I remember from my past has just not worked out for me, and it's just proven that my tastes have changed. So anyway, brainwashing, US government, boring crime novel stuff, very dated as well, so I wouldn't recommend it. Okay, we are going to end this video on a high because I did just finish this book last night. It is, as I'm filming this, it is, what day is it? It's the 22nd of May. I don't know when I'm going to post this video, but like I said, I don't think I'm going to read another book or finish another book this month. I will tell you the next book that I'm reading, but after all of those flops for the last 2 months, I really, really needed a win. So I went back to a story that I really, really loved. I loved Emily Wilde Encyclopedia of Fairies when I read it last year, and I do have the map of other lands. So I did read this. Started reading this a few days ago, and I finished it last night. Pure pleasure, pure pleasure. I gave it 5 stars on Goodreads. I think it's more of a 4.5. I don't think it hits quite the same as the first book, just simply because it definitely feels like a filler book to me. I'm very interested to see what happens in the third book just based on what's happened in this book, but I do think that it's kind of a shame because I have to wait like a whole year to see what's gonna happen. Yeah, I think this could have been a novella, to be honest. I think there's a lot of interesting, cute little facts about the world, and obviously she still has her footnotes, and they go on a little adventure, and there's other sort of fae that we kind of see, and there's also other characters in the story. Her niece is with her, and also another professor from Cambridge is with them on their quest. I think ultimately the reason why it's not a 5-star for me, other than the fact that I think it's more of a filler book, I also wanted more of a Wendell. I am one of the few I've realized that I actually like the Wendell character. I have seen a lot of people say that they don't like the Wendell character, but I thought he was so sweet in the first book, his love for her, and their little banter. That's ultimately what made me enjoy the first book, even though I thought like the actual part with the king, like the last third of that book was silly, but it had already like sold it to me, and I really enjoyed it, so I didn't mind. This book didn't have anything like that. Obviously we still have their banter. I did sort of tab a few parts where I really enjoyed some of that, and I think that their romance is very sweet, and the book is not centered around their romance, which I really, really appreciate. So it's definitely not a romantasy, but it's a fantasy with a little side note of a romance. But I just wanted more of him as an actual character. He's very much missing in action in this book for various reasons, which I won't get into, but when you, like, if you know, he kind of like, he's there, but he's not like fully there, and there's a lot more of her and her being Emily and her niece and this guy called Rose, who is one of the professors. And, you know, it was interesting. It was interesting. I thought it was a little bit rushed at the end. I was expecting maybe it to end on a cliffhanger, and then maybe we'd have more of that in the third book. But I felt like the last 100 pages were pretty rushed, because I did basically read the last 100 pages last night, and that's what I was thinking. I was thinking, oh well, we won't get to that part, that'll probably be in the next book. But actually we did get to that part. I thought it was fine. Obviously I'm giving it a 4.5/5 stars, so obviously I definitely enjoyed this book. Those are just the reasons why I didn't give it a 5-star. After the trash that I have been reading, it was a pleasure going back to a character that I very much enjoy, a cute, cozy read. Definitely, these are very cozy reads. It's not going to be for everyone. These books might be terribly boring for certain people, but for me, they work, so that's what matters. And then I decided I'm going to read this, so I got this in the Fairy Loot for May. This is Evocation by St. Gibson. Now, this author is the author of Diary of Blood, yes. And obviously, I saw a lot of people put that on their favorites book for last year. I've never read that book. I haven't read anything from this author. I've just started this book. I'm on page 12, so I don't think I'll finish this month. If I do, I do. And I'll just talk about it in another recap. But that's basically what I'm reading. I did start also I don't know if I'm going to finish it though. It's on Audible, and I just think maybe Audible books are just not the way for me. I just feel like I like physical copies of books unless I'm listening to a memoir. But actually it was on Spotify, and I started listening to, Daisy Jones and the Six. I started listening to that, which is kind of more documentary form, which I didn't realize it was. I don't really think I'm going to like that book, but that's by Taylor Jenkins Reid. So I started listening to that, but I've only listened to like maybe about 30 minutes of it or so. Yeah, about 30 minutes of it. So I don't know if I'm going to go back to finishing that, but it was free, so I decided to listen to it. That is everything that I've been reading the last couple months. I will try to post a little bit more on this channel. There's been a lot of weeks or days where I just haven't been reading, so how am I going to do a channel without reading? So, you know, I'm slowly getting back into it. I think the problem is I'm just reading so much crap, and yeah, still struggling to find books that I enjoy. And I think right now my focus is reading everything on my TBR and not buying any more books. I bought a lot of books last year and beginning of this year, and I don't want to buy any more books until maybe I have like 10 books left on my TBR. So I still get books from Veryloot and also Illumicrate. So I'm constantly getting all of these hardbacks. So my focus right now is to read all the hardbacks that I have yet to read, which is another reason why I pulled this one. I've also got 2 others that I'm going to read. Actually, my partner picked them randomly for me. So I'm going to read this one, see what I feel, and then read some more, and we'll get to it. Maybe I'll do a TBR sort of video style. I know a lot of people do that, like trying to read through their TBR, but I'm not creative enough. So anyway, if you watched this far, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.